Hello and welcome back to our Save a Seat series here on Patreon. As always, I am your podcast host, Chloe, and I am joined once again by Regina and Jade, who put together this beautiful piece on motherhood for issue 10, Influence. So we are continuing our contributor chat series where we sit down with the people who made issue 10 Influence happen and talk about the piece, what it means to them, how it all came together. So make sure you go over to our Spotify and listen to our first episode where we talked about the inspiration behind the piece, the writing process that Regina went through to make it happen, and Jade's creative process with the photo shoot. But we are joined once again by Regina and Jade. Welcome back to the podcast, ladies.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
We're so glad you're here. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the piece and what it means. So let's just dive right in. Let's just get into it. I want to turn it over to you, Regina, and talk about lessons that you have taken away from writing this piece, from motherhood itself. What are some things that you want to share with people that maybe you didn't share in the piece?
Yeah. Man, so I feel like the lessons are ever growing. I think because my kids are 4, 7, 14, and 19. So they're
Wow.
all different stages. I know. And they're constantly like, and then, okay, yeah, we've had 4-year-olds before. We never had this 4-year-old before. So it's just like ever trying to learn and pivot and code switch. And they're not the same at all. And you think you have it down, you don't. So when I'm thinking about like just motherhood in general, and when I think about conversations I'm having in the community and helping women in those spaces, it's really just this reminder that perfection is not the goal. I think I know for me, and I have these conversations very often, like that's where our brain wants to go. Like, got to get it right, have to say it right, do the right things. And like we can go in all day on like where right even comes from. But it really is like when I realize like that's not the goal. It's like who I am now. I'm going to be probably much better, much more growth in a year, later on down the line, but like, what is my best self now? And it makes me, what I remind myself of, it's about accountability and responsibility with grace and compassion of like, how can I be accountable for how I show up? Me messing up, I might yell at my kid or, forget something that was really important, whatever the case may be, and take accountability for that and responsibility for it. But also extending grace and compassion to myself because, as we have talked about, I'm influencing not only their lives and how they are seeing the world and how they navigate, but really how they treat themselves. A lot of us pick up these ways of treating ourselves a certain way because of how our mothers were and what we saw women portrayed as we were young and, what was okay and what wasn't. And so that's the biggest lesson for me. And it tends to have layers, with my adult quote unquote child. Like, what does that relationship look like? And I don't know, never had an adult child. So like just understanding those boundaries and just learning and giving myself grace so I can continue to show up the best. I think you asked something else about that. Less things I wanted to share. Yeah, like I think that was probably the most difficult thing of like this cutoff, which I totally understood. But I'm like, this cannot, it just doesn't give me a chance to say everything. So that was fun, like trying to pick out the best things to say.
Mhm.
But really, it truly is like be who you are in that moment, whether you're a mom, whether you're a woman dealing with children or influencing people in your workspace or your friends or networking. Oftentimes, like we all have these goals. Most women I know, like we're like we have our goals, we have our things we're doing, we're pushing ourselves and all that, but we just have this one life and it's like just have fun with it. And I really try to remind myself with that with my kids. Like sometimes it's okay to laugh, and it's okay to like kind of unclench your jaw and just like relax a little bit. I try to remind myself that with business, with parenting, with things that come up, and just really bringing myself to sufficiency of like in this moment, I am okay and I can figure these things out. So I think that's one of the biggest things. It's like being okay with where you are now and just allowing that to expand and grow. And when I find when we're able to do that, we actually tap into so many more parts of us that aren't probably available to us when we're so like bogged down by needing to be a certain way.
Right. Absolutely. We all have so many expectations for ourselves. And I feel like oftentimes that can bleed into some of the expectations we have for others, whether that's a good or a bad thing. Um,
Mhm.
Jade, how do you feel about some of this? Do you find yourself setting expectations or expecting perfection from yourself? And do you feel like that bleeds into your business or the way that you have relationships with others?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely, for sure. What I mean, me as a non-mother and somebody who's 99.99% sure I don't ever want to have kids, I feel like my role in mothering has manifested a lot of ways in like parenting the inner child. Um, and see a lot of the same themes in Regina's piece as I do in like how I approach that relationship. I mean, I'm very in therapy, but yeah, and just like it's a lot of like peeling back the layers of expectations and anxieties and how I show up in the world and being like, where is the root of that? Oh, it was the influence of like my parents and what they tried to teach me and you know yeah, and then just kind of reckoning with that and being like, how would I don't know, like how would I approach that child now, knowing what I know and knowing who I am at this point and what I do actually need. Um, and yeah, it's just given me just this lens to look at parenting. Um, has really given me so much, I don't know, awe of mothers who are day in day out doing that with their children and always like considering the larger implications of like the influence they have on their kids and I'm sure that's such a balance, because you know, you are human, but
Yeah.
at the same time, you have this huge, intense responsibility that you're literally like coding your child for who they'll be as an adult and how they'll relate to themselves and relate to the world.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Also, in how I parent my dog, I have a dog child, and she has a lot of needs emotionally. So,
Yeah.
yep,
I sometimes think dogs are like worse than kids sometimes.
I can see
Like,
that. Yeah.
They can't even talk to like regulate their feelings, right?
yeah, yeah. Like, and you always need a sitter. At least mine, like they grow up and eventually we don't need to pay sitters. Like your
Right.
dogs always
Dogs
take
always do.
care.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought of something, Jay, when you said that. When you talked, I really, really love. I wanted to point out, I love that when you said about like reparenting the inner child. Although, like being a non-mother, it just really took me back to that point of like you being here and a great example of how women in general like can care for and help other women like in the so subtle way that you weren't doing purposefully. You were like helping my inner child. So like just chill. Like it's okay. I know this is a big deal, but like let's just flow. And I think that that happens in so many ways in our community of how like you can call a girlfriend, you know, or if you're struggling with your kids and you can call someone who doesn't have kids, it doesn't mean they can't support you. Like just many
Right.
different ways that we help each other in that space.